This channel is part of the History Hit network. Stick around to find out more.
I'm in the Cambridgeshire Fenlands. This is the new Millennium cycle path, and right here it's going to cut through one of the most important Bronze Age sites in Europe, Flag Fen. 3,500 years ago, a walkway ran from the mainland over there right through to an island over there. But this wasn't any old walkway. When they excavated that end, they found hundreds of bronze objects deposited in the water. So what happened at this end where the walkway met the island? Could this be another place where we'll find lots of bronze objects? And what's its connection with the barrows over there on that tree line? One of which I'm pleased to say we're going to be able to excavate. Quite a lot to do in just 3 days. Francis, what was this walkway? What was it for?
Well, it was much more than a walkway. It was a way across the fen, but it was also a barrier, it was a defensive wall, and it was a place where people offered the most incredibly valuable items into the waters.
But if we don't find any of these valuable objects, then all we're going to be excavating this week is sodden wood, isn't it?
No, because it's much more important and exciting than that, because most of the archaeological evidence for the past, probably over 90%, is made of things like wood and leather, and it just rots away, and we never find any evidence of it. So when we actually get preserved wood, it's tremendously important. It tells us about the wood they're using, the woodworking techniques. We might get a dendro date, tells us about where they're managing the forests and all the rest of it. So it's fantastically important.
And are we sure that it goes in this direction?
Well, you've got it in the preservation hall excavated there, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you found bits of it under the cycleway.
Yeah, just little scraps with post holes.
So that means that where we are now, we're actually walking along it.
This way. Yeah.
What would there have been on either side?
On that side.
History Hit is like Netflix, just for history fans. With exclusive history documentaries covering some of the most famous people and events in history, just for you. Our extensive catalogue of documentaries covers everything from the rise of Hannibal Barca to the illustrious treasures of King Tut. So sign up today for broadcast quality documentaries uncovering the mysteries of the ancient world. We're committed to bringing history fans award-winning documentaries and podcasts that you cannot find anywhere else. Sign up now for a free trial, and Odyssey fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code Odyssey at checkout.
The wooden trackway ran across the low-lying fenland which flooded in the wintertime, forming an island. These oak posts are the remnants of this trackway. They were driven into the ground more than 3,000 years ago, and now they're being conserved inside this preservation building. By measuring the distance from the edge of the building to the centre of the posts, our landscape surveyors can find exactly where the posts continue outside. In this way, they can help Francis place a trench right over the trackway.
Well, we want to head towards the dry island. Now, when we find the posts in that cycleway slot, we mark the centre of where we got the holes with a bit of red and white hazard tape. You can see on that post. Can you see it? I
can see it, yeah.
On the fence post.
Yeah.
So if you keep me on the right line, I'll stop when I think we're nice and wet.
Okay. You decide where you want your hole, and then I'll...
About here, it's a bit of a dip.
Okay. Come back slowly. Bit more. Keep coming. That's it.
Right.
That's the line.
Oh, God, it's hard.
Does the trackway still exist here, though? If it does, then Trench 1 should come down onto preserved wood and confirm that the trackway continues in this direction towards the island. But what was the relationship between the trackway and the round barrow further up the slope on the dry ground on Northey Island? Were they being used at the same time?
We are so lucky.
What is a round barrow?
It's a Bronze Age burial mound, and it literally would have been a mound of dirt. I mean, now it's ploughed completely flat, so you hardly see it. But the fact is that it's going to be there, and whoever was buried inside was probably somebody of pretty good status.
So do we think that the people who were buried in those barrows could have been connected in some way to the walkway?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, I have a pet theory here. And my pet theory is that those barrows were in effect the houses of the dead on an island of the dead.
I'm convinced, aren't you?
Yeah.
So when are we going to start digging?
Now.
At this stage, nobody can be sure that this is actually a round barrow. But this aerial photograph certainly does show a circular feature which has been partially cut off by the road. It seems clear in this photograph. But how does it look on the ground? Mick?
Yeah.
Where's the barrow?
Here, in front of us, is where it actually is.
Where?
We're basically standing on it.
But this is lower than the road. There's nothing here.
It's been pretty ploughed out, hasn't it? Yeah.
So how do we know there was ever anything here at all?
Well, we had the aerial photographic evidence which showed that there was a semicircular feature basically around about here. We've actually come in earlier and actually done a little bit of survey work. And can you see in there the really nice, weak semicircular anomaly? Can you see that?
But you see, look, also right in the middle is this dark area. And that could be the primary burial. It could be an inhumation or it could be a cremation.
But we'd expect other burials, these secondary satellite burials, later probably out in this sort of area here. And these later ones might be more the sort of date of our timber work down there.
So how big is this thing?
Well, it's about 20 metres, I guess. I mean, well, let's actually mark it out. Come on then. We're about in the right place here, Tony, so follow me around. Okay?
Like the Pied Piper, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pied Piper in Bradford.
Bradford, yeah.
It's quite big, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
On, Tony, back bit, but there, right. Stop there. You're the central burial.
Very good.
Yeah, that's it.
That is.
Yeah, OK. Hold it like that. We'll bring a digger in and fill it up.
I want some grave goods, please. Phil will have to dig trench 2 from the centre of the barrow and make it long enough to locate the outer ring ditch. This may not be as simple as it sounds. Stuart and Bernard, meanwhile, are trying to make some sense of the surrounding area. If this was an island of the dead, as Francis thinks it was, then we need to find out if people were living here and how they were using the land 3,000 to 4,000 years ago.
This is where we are at the moment, in this building. This is the post alignment coming through. Trench 1 is there.
Yeah.
And that's where Trench 2 is being put on the so-called barrow.
Yeah.
So we can actually start to work out and see if there's anything in, I mean, there are very complex patterns here, to see if they'll tell us anything about this post alignment. What is it leading towards? Is it an island that's been cultivated over 2,000 years? Are there settlements here? What type of settlements are there? The clues might be in here, and there are some features which start to look quite interesting on the edge of the island. You can see this dark line on here appears to be the edge of Northey Island. It's like an old river channel. You can actually see on this map here where the crop marks start to end. It's this line down here.
What sort of date do we think this is?
Well, I reckon the earliest bits, like the barrow, I reckon they're at the very beginning of the Bronze Age, sort of 2000, 2500 BC, something like that.
It's all looking rather flat at the barrow, but Phil seems to have found something to keep his spirits up.
Have a look at that flake again. Wherever has hit it has seated the blow quite well back. If that's a plough, the plough tends to just nick against the edge and you don't get any depth there. You don't know width at the top. And the quality of the raw material, all the gravel around here is absolute rubbish flint. You wouldn't consider making tools out of it. By God, you'd think of making a tool out of that. Beautiful quality, look at that. Not a flaw in it. So yeah, I have to have a little bit of faith in this. I think we could be in here in with a good chance.
If the barrow is early Bronze Age, as Francis thinks it is, we need to find out what its connection is with the trackway.
Oh, wow, look at that. Gosh, is that...
At Trench 1, the oak posts are beginning to show through.
Yes. That looks to me like oak. Yeah. It's remarkably well preserved.
Really?
It's remarkable.
So do you reckon they're coming up in a line, Jenny?
It's a bit hard to tell, so we've only got 2 at the moment, so
Oh, right, yes.
I think we'll have to wait.
But even so, are they roughly in alignment with the track?
I think so, yeah.
Oh yes, I think they're in a line. And
Would we expect to see any signs of any marking on the edge of the axe marks or whatever on the edge there?
no, not that. That's a split face. That.
Oh, right.
That's
So
actually
been...
where it's been split in half. And you get that on oak trees. I think because oak was so valuable, they tended to divide the trees up. And as saws hadn't been invented, you split them.
By pushing wedges in and then
doing
peeling
that.
them apart,
Yeah.
When they excavated the trackway at the mainland end under this power station, they found hundreds of bronze artefacts which had been dropped into the water. Most of the objects seem to have been placed in the water on the landward side of the trackway. In the Bronze Age, these objects must have been really valuable. So why would people throw them into the water?
That's the sort, this is broken, isn't it? Was it like that when you found it?
Yes, yeah, actually we found this bit, which joins on there obviously, about sort of a metre away. It wasn't very far away at all. And it's actually broken on a casting floor. So that's
right, yeah. Oh yeah, I can see where the faults are now, and there's actually the bubbles in the metal. That wouldn't have been any use then, would it?
No, that's where it failed. And you'll notice it, I mean, it's very bent, isn't it?
Do you think that just happened while it was in the ground?
No. That was done deliberately. I mean, that was probably put over someone's thigh and given a good whack, you know. I mean, this sword
deliberately trying to break it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And that breaks deliberate as
and
well?
that breaks deliberate, yes. I'm sure of it. It's been broken to take it out of this world, to make it an item for the next world.
So these beautiful bronze objects were votive offerings, ritually broken and dropped into the water to honour the dead, or maybe to appease gods. In order to learn how these beautiful artefacts were created, we've invited Dave Chapman, a specialist in casting bronze implements, to work with us. Today, he's building the furnace he needs to melt bronze inside this tent. It's called a yurt, and it's normally where he lives.
What are we doing then, Dave?
Hi there, Mick. Well, building a bronze furnace here.
Yeah?
Out of clay.
Can I help?
That'd be great. Grab a ball of clay.
Reminds me of my potting days.
Yeah. All these different skills all get used.
So what are we going to use this for when it's finished?
Well, the idea is we're going to do a reproduction of an original bronze socketed axe, which was found here on the site.
Oh, right.
Which we've got here.
Wow, look at that, yeah.
It's a really lovely axe, this one.
Cool, crikey.
It's still got the timber inside
Good,
from the
yeah.
haft.
Oh. The thing's called 2 years, is it?
It is.
Ah, right. So what sort of temperature have we got to get up to you know, before we can do this?
Well, the bronze will start to melt at about 1,000 degrees. But
crikey.
to be able to pour it, we've got to go quite a bit over that. We've got to get up to something around 1,200.
And this has all got to be smoothed.
Yep, the more it's all worked in, just like in building a pot.
The barrow may have been ploughed out completely. All they're finding here is gravel and small pockets of silt, both of which occur naturally. Phil's having a bit of a problem making any sense of its geology at all.
Just more silt?
Just more silt, a silt pocket there. It's petering out over here. There's a line to the gravel coming down here, but with a distinct line there, but nothing on that side at all.
And the gravel's so clean too, and you've got no nice edges or anything.
No fines.
No fines,
no nothing. No way straight, nothing.
No, I'm afraid it don't look very good. It's a shame, but it don't look very good at all.
Phil may be struggling to locate the barrow, but at Trench 1, the wooden trackway is already being uncovered.
That is a pretty good-looking trench, isn't it?
It's good, isn't it? Yes, we're really pleased with it. And we're really pleased with what's coming out of it as well.
Which is?
Well, the first thing we hit was that large piece of wood sticking up between Maisie's feet there. took the level down a bit further, and as you can see, we've now got a whole spread of wood right across the whole trench.
Now, do you think that some of this is just random, or is it all part of a walkway?
Well, I think some of it's clearly been rammed down into the ground. It's definitely a constructed walkway, but I think the random stuff that's strewn about is probably also part of the platform that's trying to make it traversable, as it were.
Back at Dave's yurt, the furnace is completed. And now it needs to be gently fired overnight in order to be ready to melt the bronze for the axe head.
When are you going to fire up the furnace?
Well, soon, I think, because it's almost finished, isn't it, Dave?
It is almost finished.
And what about tomorrow? We drew a bit of a blank with the barrow today, didn't we?
You know, I mean, I totally agree with Francis. I mean, I think it's absolutely crucial we find it, but I don't know, I don't look very good at the minute.
It's there. Just have confidence. I'm sure. Yeah, let me out there tomorrow morning. Yeah, I'll find it.
What about the walkway?
Well, thank goodness, that's the one bit that's actually going quite well at the moment. What we're going to do tomorrow is plan all the wood that we've got there at the moment and then take it all off and go down a layer and hopefully get down to the Bronze Age ground levels.
And that's where you found the Bronze Age bits and pieces at the other end of the walkway, wasn't it?
That's right, that's the pay dirt, yeah.
So hopefully tomorrow we might get some bronze finds, so join us after the break. And if we don't find any, then
we can make some.
It's day 2, and Phil's got off to an early start at the round barrow. He was a little unsure at the end of yesterday, but Francis has come to convince him that the barrow's ring ditch really is here.
Oh, you give me a shot.
The case of the disappearing barrow.
Well, look, I mean, we got in here nice and early this morning, and we've gone down, we're right down on the solid, good gravel now.
Yep.
And, I mean, at the minute, there's still nothing showing up.
Ah, well, I'm quite happy what you got. Now, if you actually look at the latest and the highest tech of everything...
Using a global positioning device, Bernard has plotted the trench on the geophys plan of the barrow to within a couple of centimetres.
There's your trench.
And our ring ditch cuts right the way through
Cuts right through it.
What's the scale of this?
Ah. Pass.
You amaze me.
Phil's using his own high-tech methods to find the elusive ring ditch.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
17.
17. So
Right.
2/3 of that's about 6 back.
About 6 back, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6.
It's about there then.
Yeah.
Oh! Ah! Francis? Look at that edge.
Oh, it's spot on. Yeah. That's it. That's it, all right, isn't it?
Beautiful edge.
And then look, on the side here, chop that up a bit. And you've got the...
Looks like you've got a cut coming down there too, yeah.
Yeah,
look,
you've got the bank, I think, that went round the edge. I think.
Within our trench, the section of the barrow looks like this. And originally, the barrow would have looked like this. The trench was then extended at one end to pick up another section of the ring ditch. At the yurt, Dave's completed modelling the axe head in beeswax. Now, a clay mould has to be made around it to pour the molten bronze into.
Is this horse dung that you've got here?
It is.
What are you actually doing with it then?
I'm mixing it with the clay, the same as we did with the hay and the clay for the furnace.
So how much do you need to go with the clay?
1/3 dung to 2/3 clay.
Right, okay. What happens to it then?
Then we have to cover the waxes, which we've finished, in the clay mix.
Is there anything I can do to help you with that then?
Well, that'd be great, actually, yeah. If you could take little bits of clay and dip them in the water and then work them until they go quite soft. Yeah, that's good. Get them really nice and soft, because then they'll press onto the clay surface and cover it really smoothly.
Right, okay, I'm doing that.
They need to heat the mould slowly to melt out the wax inside. And while Dave fires the moulds, Phil's been allowed to leave his barrow for a while. He's helping Maisie Taylor, Flag Fens wood consultant, to find a handle to haft the axe head onto.
What are we looking for?
What they're looking for is where a branch comes cleanly out of the trunk at the correct angle. The socketed axe head will be hafted onto the heartwood, which is inside the trunk.
The theory is often proven wrong, isn't it, eh? That's the beauty of theories. They're usually written by people who've never tried it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you just shin up and measure it and see if it's nice.
What do you think I am, a monkey? Why don't we bring the tree down to us, right?
This oak tree is about 60 years old. Luckily for us, but not for the tree, it's being felled as part of a tree thinning programme in a managed woodland.
It's a very large handle, Maisie.
Yeah, I said you got a lot of wood to take out of that.
God, that's better.
You all right?
Yeah.
Right, I am glad. I thought you might ask me to help. Now, hang on, you've got to navigate the nettles and the brambles.
With such good preservation, there's a lot to be learnt from the 3,000-year-old plant remains. However, Trench 1 has been really slow going, with all the wood of the trackway to uncover and record. Our environmental expert, Charles French, is taking a sample from the section. From the seeds contained in it, we'll be able to see how the island and trackway looked 3,000 years ago. It's also possible to get an accurate date for the wood using dendrochronology. That's a kind of barcode for wood, analysing the tree's yearly growth rings. The samples will be sent to a lab in Sheffield. Hopefully we'll get a date in the next day or so. After careful sieving, a trained eye can pick out and identify all sorts of different seeds that were growing here in the Bronze Age.
Gosh, they're tiny, aren't they? You wouldn't want to sneeze, would you?
No.
So, what species are they from?
Well, the dryland species we've got so far is elderflower here.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah, and we've got a larger tree called alder.
Oh, we found some bits of that in the trench, in fact. Some of the wood there is
it ties in quite nicely with that. And going from the drier land, we can actually find plants which prefer more open water.
Oh, wow, what's that?
Which are these are members of the buttercup family called water crowfoot, which produces masses and masses of white flowers at this time of year.
And that sort of actually sits on the water as well?
It sits on the water, yes. So you can get a massive blanket covering the whole lake.
Have we got anything from sort of further onto the dry land?
We have one thing from there, which is quite nice. I think it's probably emma wheat.
Oh, that's a prehistoric.
It's a prehistoric,
isn't
yes,
it?
yes, exactly.
It's it's a very mosaic type of landscape, and parts of it are incredibly well managed. And if you think this whole fringe of the small developing lake around Flag Fen would have been full of natural resources to collect and exploit, and it would have been a beautiful place. I mean, nothing like that really exists in modern East Anglia and Fenland today.
Victor's been making his own interpretation of Flag Fen in former times.
That's a gory thing in there. They're actually burning a body, you know, it's a cremation that they did. What they did was they burned the body, then they moved the ashes over to the barrow. So that's where we've been excavating, and we found
So people may have been using the trackway for their funeral processions, cremating their dead and interring the ashes in the burial mound, probably with grave goods for the next world.
I've just heard that you're now absolutely convinced this is a barrow.
There's
Why?
absolutely no doubt about it, Tony. This is the ditch of the arm, the trench we put in here. If you go over the spoil tip, you'll see where we found it this morning.
Over here?
Keep going round in an arc.
So this is
Yep, that's it. Keep going round there.
Yeah.
Keep going round there.
Over here? Can I go across your tree?
Just see it? There it is, look.
Just I saw it in there. So it would go round. This is pretty much the area that Chris described yesterday
it.
morning, isn't
Yep.
it? So presumably it would go up here into the road.
That's plenty further. There's a truck.
Okay, any further. Well, all right, I believe you. This is definitely a ring ditch.
Yeah.
But how do you know that it's Bronze Age?
Look at this. Not only would you know it's Bronze Age, but that must be associated with a body. Such high quality.
Is that an arrowhead?
Big triangular arrowhead.
Beautiful, isn't it? But why is it a Bronze Age one?
Well, that particular type of arrowhead with that beautiful ripple flaking on it, they occur around about 2000 BC and a little bit later.
Yeah.
And one was found in a barrow at Ibury, about 3/4 of a mile away from here. You could actually see it from here. And it was found with a pot of early Bronze Age type, a food vessel.
Quality
in
of
a
that
grave.
work is so good.
So is it a ceremonial one?
Oh yeah, that's
certainly.
not something
Yeah.
you shoot at a duck. No, sir.
Without question, this flint arrowhead is a beautiful artefact, with exquisite ripple flaking, but more importantly for us, it's evidence that dates the first use of the barrow to the early Bronze Age, about 2000 BC. Paul Middleton's taking samples and checking their phosphate levels. If a cremated body were put in the barrow, the phosphate would enrich the surrounding soil and show up as a spike. He's set up a small field laboratory so that he can get results on site. The bluer the colour, the higher the phosphate levels and the probability of there being a burial.
The main thing is you've got lots of activity, haven't you?
There's definitely a lot of activity right the way across, which shows that there's an intensity of activity within the ditch.
Yeah, so in other words, you wouldn't expect to get something like that if it was just one burial and people walked off and left the site.
Not at all.
No,
I think
it's a long time, isn't it?
It's a long time. It's a good build-up and a certain intensity of activity. So although the barrow seems to be badly ploughed, we're getting traces of that activity there still.
Oh, I better get back to it.
Which is good.
The best is yet to come. Look, now then, be careful where you're walking. Do you see this
dark
curve?
stain?
You can see round.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where I'm walking.
That's right.
Yeah, along here.
That is the foundation of a roundhouse.
Yeah.
But if it's down here, does that mean that it predates the barrow?
It must do. You do not put a roundhouse on a burial mound, but you might put a burial mound on a roundhouse.
Hang on, doesn't this rather knock on the head your idea of this being an island of the dead? Because I thought that one of the things about an island of the dead was that people didn't live on them.
Oh no, oh far from it. No, this was probably where a big man lived, okay?
Yeah.
He dies, and then his soul goes to the next world, and they put a house of the dead over his house of the living. They put a barrow where he actually lived, so he sleeps in eternity in his house of the dead.
This is a slight kind of veering off for this particular theory, isn't it?
It's called thinking on your feet.
It's still a great story. We've got another day and a half to see whether it's right or not.
It's looking great though, isn't it, eh?
It is.
Anyway,
So the barrow was placed on top of the roundhouse around 2000 BC. Francis thinks that this roundhouse, which probably looked like this, is the oldest house ever found in Britain. It must be at least 4,000 years old. I wonder what it would actually have looked like inside. We looked at one that Francis had previously excavated and reconstructed.
How many people would have lived in here?
About 10, maybe 12.
And in Bronze Age times, there would have been a number of these scattered all around this landscape?
Yeah, well, this is a farmhouse. It had been dotted through the fields. You know, you probably looked out of that door and you'd have seen 4 or 5, something like that.
Stuart and Mick are trying to get a better look at the area from the air. They're really interested to see if they can find the place where the trackway would have met the island.
Right. This is Northey Island.
Yeah.
This is where the causeway was heading towards, and presumably in prehistory, these little islands of higher ground were prime territory for settlement
well, hunter-gatherers, then settlers, farmers and so on. And then you can see our trench very clearly.
That's trench 1, isn't it?
Trench 1 with the timber. So as we come round now, we're looking back down the alignment towards the
the power station, aren't we?
Yeah.
And what we've got to do now, I think, is dig a bit to the east or to the left of that trench, haven't we?
Further away from the building.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to get the transition from the wet ground onto higher,
Up onto
drier
the
ground.
higher ground, yeah.
Mick's looking for the point where the trackway joined the island, so Carenza can open Trench 3. If it's the same as the mainland end, then this is where votive offerings may have been placed in the water. Carenza and Mick are taking samples from the subsoil, trying to find where the peat finishes and the island's gravel begins. When they find the landfall, they'll open Trench 3.
What we really want to do is put in a long, thin trench that will catch the edge of the trackway. We won't, if we find wood of the trackway, we won't go down into it at all. We'll carry the trench along until we get to the edge of the trackway and then go down at the edge of the trackway, which is where we hope we'll find any artefacts that were being thrown off the edge of the trackway into the water.
How long before you can start?
Well, we're there, aren't we? We're there. We can bring the machine in now and cut our trench back across that way.
4 o'clock.
We're going to start it now.
Yep.
If you clear off, we'll get on with it, right?
Can I believe you?
Yeah.
I'll just stand a little way off.
Katie, bring the machine in.
The land would flood with the water coming in.
Francis, you're still pretty convinced about the island of the dead theory, aren't you? Even though we've seemed to have found some kind of hut underneath.
Oh, I love it.
The barrow.
I love it, yeah.
Whereas you, Stuart, are more sceptical about it.
Yes.
Why?
Because you've got all this activity which is part of living. You've got this agricultural landscape, you've got these boundaries, trackways. This is a landscape where people are farming, they're living, they're enjoying life, and they're dying. The things in pink are later than the Bronze Age, they're Iron Age and later. If we take those off, what we're left with is a series of features which lots of evidence point towards them being Bronze Age. We have a series of linear boundaries which form themselves into a pattern of fields. We have trackways.
How do you feel about what he's just said? He's saying it's not an island of the dead, it's an island of the living, there's farms on it and, I don't know, maybe habitation or whatever.
That's fine by me. I mean, the island of the dead is the island in the mind, in the perception of people there. Just as Lindisfarne, Holy Island, you've got sheep grazing around the, the ancient part, the holy bit. I find it interesting, actually, when you look at that closely. There seems to be a reserved area with outfields leading up to the barrows. It's sitting there in splendid, glorious isolation, and I reckon it was a very important place, and people came there from miles around. OK, so people came from there locally, but I can imagine them coming along that timber walkway, as we like to call it, post alignment, whatever you want to call it, and going there and burying their dead.
How do you feel about that, the idea of people bringing their dead from some way away and sticking them in their barrows?
I think I slightly don't support that theory at the moment.
It's amazing how polite archaeologists are when they argue with each other, isn't it?
I don't see in some essence that this feature, its main reason is to move bodies across from one dry ground to another piece of dry ground. I think it's much more important than that.
I'd go along with that.
It's been a really frustrating day in this trench today. The idea was that we'd get rid of all this late Bronze Age wood here so that we could get down onto the earlier stuff underneath. But before we could do that, we had to record all the later wood. And that recording has taken all flipping day. We've had to draw every single knot hole, I think. So we've now decided we haven't got time to excavate any further in this whole trench. We're just going to excavate in this area. So hopefully, by this time tomorrow, we'll be down on the early Bronze Age stuff.
From outside, it sounds like an extremely large animal breathing in here.
That's it, the fire dragon.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, we've got to keep feeding that fire because it's burning away pretty fierce at the bottom.
Yeah. 99,000. There's your 1,000 degrees.
At 1,000 degrees, the bronze in the furnace is beginning to melt. But to pour it, the temperature must be at least 1,150 degrees. The clay moulds are hot and ready. The firing has melted the beeswax and burnt out the horse dung, which makes them porous, so gases can escape when the bronze is poured into them. If they weren't porous, they'd explode.
That's good. OK, that's brilliant. I've got it turned the right way. That's it. Great.
11:48. 11:49. 11:50. 11:50.
Okay. Right way up. Start the lid off.
If Dave's been successful, we'll have a beautiful bronze axe head inside. Join us after the break when we smash open the mould to take a look. We've still got a heck of a lot of work to do at the walkway, and we've only got one day left. But here at the Barrow, this entire end of the trench has been transformed. And it looks as though Francis and his lot have been working since dawn. What's going on here?
Well, actually, Tony, we've made the trench bigger.
I spotted that. Why?
Well, we've had some very exciting news. There's done a phosphate survey down the edge of this trench here.
Yeah.
And they show that outside the trench, the phosphate levels are low, outside the barrow, whereas in the barrow, they're uniformly high, except for a spot down here. And there's a massive phosphate spike. There's a huge concentration.
What could have caused that?
Could be bones. I know what you're thinking. It could also be a contented cow standing there and dropping cow pats 3,000 years ago.
So it's either an early Bronze Age noble or it's dung.
Well, there's loads of other things it could be as well.
Like what?
Well, it could be a mole. Right?
And this is right in the centre of where the ring ditch is.
And it's also the place where we found the flint arrowhead.
How are we going to find out? Do we just do a simple, small excavation?
Yeah, very careful hand dig, looking out for bones. When you see grinning teeth, then you stop.
Yeah.
The haft for the axe is coming on really well. Let's hope they've got an axe head to fit onto it after yesterday's bronze pouring.
That's excellent.
God, look at that. Well, that's looking very good, isn't it? Is it in there?
There we go. Oh, it's very hot still. Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah.
It's all there.
Lovely.
You're pleased with that?
Yep, pleased enough.
So using exactly the same methods as Bronze Age people did, our socketed axe has been created. Now we need to haft it so that Phil can try it out. At the trackway, Trench 1, Maze is lifting one of the excavated posts. It's a delicate procedure, and the object of the exercise is to lift it out in one piece, if possible.
You think we'll be able to get the tip out?
I'm not letting him out of this hole till he does.
It's like a dog trying to find a bone.
Make sure you got your hands right underneath. That's it.
Oh, it's just slippery, isn't it?
I'll come round and join you.
They're going to preserve it now by putting it in a tank of water.
Yeah. Certainly no gravels are not hitting them. There we go.
Meanwhile, Stuart is taking more soil samples.
What's that then? Right. I can see it's wet and orange, but what is it? Yeah, we've basically got sand. There's some silt in it, but we're looking at something laying down by water. Not.
He's trying to prove his theory to Francis, that the post alignment is more than just a trackway.
Did you get any evidence to support your challenge?
Yes, we did. We cut samples down through the soil. This is the post alignment, and the samples showed here quite clearly that we've got a river channel coming through here, an old river channel. So where the landfall of the post alignment is assumed to be is actually on a separated little bit of land. Now, if you look at the flood model that Ray's put together, over time the waters are coming in, they're retreating, they're advancing. With that information, as the flood waters come in, watch what happens.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The post alignment ends on an island.
Yeah.
The Bronze Age farmers would have been, to some extent, scared stiff of what they were seeing. They'd see their land being taken from them. And they live off their land. They live on it. It's fundamental to their existence.
Right.
So why would what you call a post alignment end on a tiny little island?
I think because what it's doing is making a statement in the landscape in terms of being a boundary. It's a symbolic boundary. It's against the threat of invasion by water, not by people.
Yeah, but that's a fairly simple symbolic boundary, OK? I think there was a much more profound symbolic boundary in people's minds. And that's a symbolic boundary between life and death. And what reinforces that idea is that the finds that we make are all on one side of it. They tend not to be on Stuart's wet side.
So they all tend to be in our territory?
In our side, in our territory.
Yeah.
So, I like that a lot.
So the sea level was rising at that time in the Bronze Age. The post alignment was both a physical and a ritual boundary.
Carenza?
Oh, hi there.
Yesterday afternoon, this was going to be the really exciting trench. It was going to be from this walkway that our Bronze Age people stood and lobbed all their ritual Bronze Age implements into the water.
We're getting some really, really interesting finds out of here. We're getting several bits of posh late Bronze Age pottery. There's see this sort of really nice fine.
Now, why do you say that's
shine.
Posh? That just looks like a bit of old anthracite.
That's really nice, black, polished. You imagine that when it was clean and new, that's been burnished. It would have been a really nice sort of black, shiny bowl.
Yeah.
It looks like that's a vessel that's been smashed in place here, and that looks like a ritual activity. And to support that, just down the trench where Katie is there, we've got a horse's jawbone.
Which is not a meat item off of the animal at all.
It's not a bit you use for meat. It looks, again, as if that was a highly valued, much loved animal, which, again, is part of a ritual deposition.
You've also got a lot of these white pebbles.
I mean, this one here has just come up. They're all the same. They're all roughly this sort of size. They're quartz. They've been beach rolled, so they're smoothed.
So they wouldn't have come out of the land here?
No, they're not sort of washed in with a load of gravel. Obviously, they've come in naturally. There've been a whole load of other pebbles with them as a layer.
So for
and they're
some
always
reason,
white.
people have brought these white stones off a beach and brought them
It's
here.
not
Why would
uncommon
they do that?
elsewhere. You get it in early Christian times in Ireland, and you get it in Cornwall as well. It looks as if they select particularly white stones to drop in significant places.
Well, I can't help feeling that this seems to be something. This is a deliberate ritual act as well.
Back at the Barrow, the phosphate spike has been confirmed as a definite cremation. But what proof have they found?
It doesn't look nearly as exciting as I thought it would. It just looks like a little step in the trench.
It's very exciting.
Why?
What I've got here is actually somebody's tooth. That's fractured dental enamel. During the cremation process, the dentine inside the tooth expands and the enamel on the outside fractures and breaks off.
Will there be fines, do we think?
Well, there may well be, because very often cremated remains were actually buried with uncremated artefacts, as well as cremated artefacts. So we
can't go down until we know how far it extends.
But it's 12:30.
We still can't go down until we know how far it extends. Even at 12:30.
When can we go down?
As soon as you get out of the way.
You always say that. You always say that. But we won't be able to do it today.
You bet. We've got to.
That great big chunk of tree is barely recognisable now. Phil and Maisie seem to be really happy with it.
But I mean, it is for all that. I mean, it's a beautiful object, isn't it? Just a great sort of use of the flow of the wood.
It's interesting though how difficult we found to make it, and the more I work on this material, the more I think that the Bronze Age people must have been the greatest woodworkers.
So you want to put down like that?
Straight in and lean down, okay?
God, stone of crows!
I think we're probably there.
Think we are!
Lift it out.
God, stone of crows!
Lift it out.
What? Oh, what? Off the...
Yeah.
Oh, wow!
Okay. Right, I'm going to go cool this down.
Good Lord, look at that! God, look at that sap come out of there, look, don't.
So where's he gone now?
It's going to be a granny.
Yeah, that one is a granny. One before, wasn't it? One before was a reef. You reckon that's now ready for you to try it out, do you?
Every bit, and it's waiting and I'm waiting too. Oh.
Oh, that's all right, isn't it?
Look at that.
Look at that.
So you get the imprint of the blade actually on the end of the stake. That's like the ones they find on the site. You can see how it happens now.
It's coming off in parallel chips, really.
Yeah.
That's good, isn't it? That is good.
Hey,
That is good.
And
Look
at
at
that
that.
point, you know, is it?
You'd soon knock that in, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You would.
Oh wow, look at that. Oh, that's fantastic. You can actually see all the scoops of the axe marks there, can't you? Did you get the tip out of the ground in the end, Chris?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. So that fits on sort of like that, does it? Amazing, I can see the cut marks here. Are they a bronze axe, presumably, if that's the date?
Absolutely, no question. Yep, absolutely.
And they carry on down into the...
Yes, and as you get towards the end, the preservation improves. So we come down here, and here we've got this, they're not bothering to finish the woodworking, so the axe is going in, so this isn't really attached. And if we were to lift it off, we'd get the perfect shape of the axe where it had bitten in. Has Ian got the date?
I don't know, let me find out. Ian?
Yeah?
Hi there, have you got the dendro dates for those bits from Flag Fen yet?
Well, they've just come through.
Oh, brilliant.
But we've not got dates for all of them yet.
Oh, right, OK. Can you give me dates for any of them?
Well, we've got dates for what you've called number 4.
What's the date for that?
For number 4?
Yeah, so...
Number 4, we've got rings running right out to 1090 BC. So the bit of wood is probably from the mid 1000s, so 1060, 1050 BC period.
1060 BC,
Yeah.
1,000 years BC. That's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. That's exactly the sort of date we were hoping for, really, wasn't it? That's
Absolutely.
The flint arrowhead grave goods tell us that the first use of this barrow was in about 2000 BC. What we need now is to try to confirm that it continued to be used right through to the time the trackway was in use, which according to our dendro date was in about 1000 BC.
By golly, I think we've got a piece of bone.
Really?
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Ploughing, worm action, water and ice have destroyed almost all of this cremation. After more than 3,000 years in the earth, it's remarkable to find a piece of human bone like this.
Oh!
It comes from a little shouldered bowl or jar. Can only be one thing, that's late Bronze Age fineware. It's exactly like the stuff they were finding on the post alignment. Same fabric, same fabric, everything.
That ties his dates back in again,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
it can only be that.
Yeah.
It's about 900.
Yeah.
900 BC or thereabouts.
It's quite,
I mean, that is an amazing
Yeah, it's exactly
tie up, really, knowing that trackway and this monument were still being used or were being used at the same time.
But it really proves it beyond any doubt.
Oh, yeah.
So here it is, proof that the round barrow was used as a cemetery for more than 1,000 years. This cup was placed in the grave as a gesture to a much-loved family member 3,000 years ago. A final drink to prepare them for the next world.
Yeah.
Grubby little piece, but by God, ain't that important?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in just 3 days, we've learnt an awful lot about Flag Fen, the island of the dead, and the ancient Britons who lived and died here 4,000 years ago. We've had a fantastic 3 days, haven't we? And at last we're in part of Flag Fen that looks like it must have looked 3,500 years ago when our Bronze Age walkway stretched across the landscape. And we're here because Francis has got one more task to perform. What is it?
It's rather a wet one, actually. Dave the metalworker is very keen that we put something back into Flag Fen, having removed so much over the years. And to be quite honest, I'm very happy to do it.